And as everyone remembers, this is data from Johns Hopkins University. Back on March 19th, our very first webinar, we had 230,000 cases of individuals who tested positive for COVID. Within 1 week, that number jumped up to 500,000 people. Now we've actually done, this is our 11th one, so we're only showing the last 3 weeks. And if you remember 3 weeks ago on May 7th, there were 3.8 million people who had tested positive with COVID around the world, 4.4 million last week. And as of this morning, over 5 million people have tested positive for COVID. And again, and this is people who test positive, who recognize that there are many people who have been exposed to this virus who are not tested as well. We look at data from Canada. Again, back on March 19th, there was only 780 Canadians at that point in time who tested positive for COVID, jumping to 3,400 individuals by March 26. And again, this data is provided by Esri Canada. It's a great website that you can follow here. Looking at these last 3 weeks, May 7th, 63,000 Canadians with COVID, jumping to 72,000 on May 14th. And the number is now 80,000 as of May 21st. This value right here actually reflects the number of people who've been tested over the last 6 days. And one of the reassuring patterns that we're seeing in Canada is that these numbers week by week is getting smaller. And so that's really good. And that reflects that there's a huge number of people who are also recovering. But unfortunately now the number of people who have died in Canada from COVID has exceeded 6,000 Canadians. If you look at the provinces who are the hardest hit, the provinces obviously with the largest number of people living there have the most cases. Quebec at 44,000, Ontario with 23,000, Alberta where I live 6,700 cases. And then if we standardize the provincial data for the number of people who live per province, so looking at cases per 100,000, we see that Quebec is still amongst the hardest hit province, not only in the country, but throughout the world at over 500 cases per 100,000. Ontario at 164. Alberta very close to Ontario. We continue to see low rates in Manitoba at 20 cases per 100,000, as well as most of the maritime provinces with the exception of Nova Scotia. If we look at outcomes in Canada, so this is data from Statistics Canada that looks at outcomes specifically for Canadians. The majority of Canadians who have tested positive have had mild symptoms and have been able to recover at home. 11% have ended up in hospital, 3% ICU, and the case fatality rate is 6%. These values are different based on how old you are. We continue to show, and this is similar with data across the world, that if you're under the age of 20, if you're a child or an adolescent, the vast majority of those who have tested positive have been able to recover at home without any fatality. Similarly, between the ages 20 and 59, Canadians continue to do well with low rates of going into hospital and low rates of dying. The group that does the worst or the hardest hit are our elderly population, individuals over the age of 60, 20% end up in hospital, 4% ICU, and the case fatality rate is 16%. And the older you are, the higher your risk is.